On this bill, Mr. President, when we return after our Thanksgiving break, and to all of our men and women who wear the uniform of the United States of America, happy Thanksgiving.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
I just wanted to thank the senator from Georgia for his leadership on the Armed Services Committee and also for the important work he's been doing as the Vice Chair of the Intelligence Committee to make sure that our country is protected. And he's been particularly knowledgeable about these issues on how we treat detainees. And we did have a detailed colloquy yesterday on the floor. And his insight has been so important in making sure that we have the right policies in place to protect America. And with that, I would yield the floor. Thank you.
Mr. President. Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent to be able to speak as though in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to introduce my Buy Back America Bonds Bill, S-1909. This bill will not only help raise awareness of our nation's debt crisis, but it will also give every American the chance to be a part of the solution to fix our country's fiscal dilemma. My bill will allow Americans to invest in this incredible country and bring foreign-held U.S. debt back to American hands, while at the same time reducing federal government spending. But before I talk about where my bill is going, I want to explain where I'm coming from. In World War II, war bonds were sold to help pay for our nation's national defense and reduce the amount of debt incurred. People from all kinds of backgrounds saved toward purchasing war bonds, often with nickels, dimes, and quarters. On the job, people deducted the cost of war bonds from their meager paychecks. Families invested in war bonds and saved for the future. During World War II, President Roosevelt even asked the Boy Scouts of America to sell war bonds, and they did. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts worked with their packs and troops to sell bonds to their neighbors and communities. In other words, all across the country, folks of all walks and types were working together for one collective goal: to do their part for the country's war effort. Men, women, and children were selling and purchasing these war bonds, all in the name of lending a hand to our fellow countrymen and to pay for the costs of war. I was born during World War II. When I was born, my parents bought me a war bond. I still have that $20 bond today. Not cashing it was my first gift to my country, and it's also a keepsake to me. In 1941, when savings bonds were retitled as war bonds in the terrible and devastating aftermath of Pearl Harbor, the United States rallied as a collective nation in support of the war and war bond effort. At the time, though, the average American only earned about $2,000 a year. Despite these hardships and tough times, 134 million Americans were called on to be part of the war bond effort, and more than half of the United States population, 85 million people, responded to the patriotic call to participate. The Scouts raised money and personally donated their own funds, 10 cents at a time, in the form of stamps that could be pasted into a war bond booklet. When war bond books were complete, they could be taken to the local bank and sometimes even the local post office to purchase bonds. One innovative group even created a promotional cardboard with slots for 75 quarters that could be filled before it would be redeemed for a bond. Showing his leadership and dedication to the effort, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt purchased the very first war bond issued. In part of President Roosevelt's April 30th, 1941 radio address to the American public, he said, quote, "One thought is uppermost in my mind as I make grateful acknowledgement of this dual honor. It is that in reserving the first defense savings bond and the first defense postal savings stamps in the name of the President, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Postmaster General have given emphasis to the national character of this defense savings campaign. This character of the campaign is national in the best sense of the word, for it is going to reach down, we hope, to the individual and the family in every community and on every farm, in every state and every possession of the United States." The President goes on to say, "It is national and it is homey at the same time. For example, I'm buying not one stamp but 10 stamps each to go into a little book for each of my 10 grandchildren. And the first savings bond is being made out in the name of Mrs. Roosevelt as beneficiary. It's fitting that the President in his purchase should be a sort of symbol of the determination of all the people to save and sacrifice in defense of democracy. In a larger sense, this first defense bond and these first defense stamps sold to the President constitute tangible evidence of a partnership between all of the people and their government, entered into to safeguard and perpetuate all of those precious freedoms which government guarantees. In this time of national peril, what we all must realize is that the United States government is you and I and all other families next door, all the way across the country and back again. It's one great partnership. That ends the quote from President Roosevelt. The President concluded his address by asking his fellow Americans to demonstrate their faith in America by investing in the new defense bonds and stamps. I remember as a child bringing dimes to school so that I could purchase a stamp for my savings bond book, one stamp at a time, saving toward the price of a full savings bond. I remember vividly that the bond was a lofty $18.75. When I got my book filled, we could go down to the bank so that I could finally trade for my bond, that piece of paper showing that I had done my small part to help in the effort and make this country better. Kids of my generation learned the value of saving and helping their country through the savings bond program. Today I rise to speak about a different sort of fight, and yet at the same time this fight is one that is no less serious than the one I remember as a child. Today our nation is struggling to fight a growing spending problem and a debt crisis. Debt's our problem now. It's time to get all of America involved, not with the promise of wealth, but with a sense of investing in our country, of buying America back, pulling us back from the brink of bankruptcy to other countries. The national debt stands at $15 trillion, which breaks down to nearly $48,000 for every person in our entire country. These figures are a frightening reminder that we cannot continue to put off the tough choices and that we must restore the fiscal discipline to the federal government. This is a tough fight that has to be tackled on all fronts. Today I'm proposing a step in the right direction and calling upon Americans for support of this effort. I'm proposing that we bring American debt back to American hands. I'm proposing the Buy Back America bonds, S-1909. My bill would buy back American bonds to American citizens in affordable $25 increments so that every American can afford to invest and do their part. The Treasury would then use the funds from these bonds to begin paying down the $4 4/10 trillion in foreign-held U.S. debt. Investing in Buy Back America bonds would allow Americans to show their patriotism and faith in this great nation. Unlike the war bonds of my childhood, Buy Back American bonds would create a new series of savings bonds which are indexed for inflation, as well as earning a fixed interest rate. By tying Buy Back America bonds to inflation, we ensure the buying power of consumers' investments remains the same while also earning them additional interest. These could be called gold standard bonds. That's two ways the Buy Back America bonds would earn and keep their value for investors, in addition to their patriotic and symbolic investment. Now, these aren't going to be barn burner investments, but they will keep our nation and help our nation not only pay down our debt, but pay down the amount of debt owed to foreign nations. What makes this bill particularly special is that for every bond purchase, citizens are also helping the federal government to reduce spending. Every year after the first year, the amount of Buy Back America bonds sold would be tallied, and that exact amount would then be cut from federal spending the following year. I stand before you today to explain not only where I'm coming from with my Buy Back America bonds, but also why our nation needs a collective effort to rally around to make steps towards a more responsible federal budget and getting our national debt under control. Investing in America and bringing foreign-held debt back to American hands is where I propose to start. I ask my colleagues and the American people to help me be an integral part of the debt crisis solution. Not only am I a father, I'm a grandfather, and I want to be the first to purchase Buy Back America bonds for my 4 grandchildren. I want my grandchildren and yours to have every opportunity for a great quality of life, to know the meaning of faith and investment in a prosperous United States. I'm doing everything I can to ensure that that happens. That means proposing solutions to problems and working to get my colleagues on board. So today I rise and ask for the support of my colleagues for this great effort and support for S-1909, my Buy Back America bonds bill. I'd ask unanimous consent that the bill be printed following this statement.
Without objection.
What President Roosevelt said then is equally true now. Quote, "In this time of national peril, we must all realize that it's the United States government is you and I, and all other families next door, all the way across the country and back again. It's one great partnership." End quote. Working together, we can solve all of this. We need to solve all of this. We need to start solving it right now. And this is one way to do it. I yield the floor. I'd suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Wyoming.
I'd ask that further proceedings under the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
I'd also ask unanimous consent to speak as in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was sorry to hear that the super committee is in trouble, that they might not be able to agree for a report. Then this morning's Washington Post front page headline was, quote, "Debt panel failure won't cause catastrophe." I tell you, every day we don't find a solution, every day we spend is a catastrophe. We have maxed out our credit cards. Now, here's one way that came to my attention. I was traveling in Wyoming, and I checked into the hotel for the night, and the person checking me in, very embarrassed, said, "I'm sorry, but it won't take your credit card." It was a federal credit card. I said, "Goodness, we're in more trouble than I thought." I gave him my personal credit card, and that went right through. So I'm not sure where we are, but I know that we have maxed out our credit cards, and not just that, also the symbolic credit cards that we have. We've got as much debt as we can probably sustain, and as debt comes due across the world for other countries, it's going to be tougher and tougher and tougher to be able to sell more debt. We're kind of in the same situation as Greece and Italy, except for 2 things. One is we are a big, flexible country that has pulled ourselves out of terrible situations time and time again, and we'll do it this time too. We also own our own money supply, and that really helps. Now, when constituents ask, you know, what can they expect, I always start the conversation by saying you should expect to get no more than what the 2008 level was. You know, we increased things considerably after that with the stimulus bill, and that increased some bases, and we've got to get back down to 2008 just as a beginning. And I've got to say the President has had a chance to change direction, and I have to congratulate the President for naming a deficit commission. And I even like the people that he named to it, with Senator Simpson from Wyoming and Erskine Bowles heading up that committee. And I think they did some tremendous work. And I think we should pay more attention to what they had to say. Now, I had a little disappointment when the President did his State of the Union speech following their report. He had an opportunity to repaint the same bleak picture that that committee painted, and America would have understood better. Although, from traveling across our country, and particularly in Wyoming, I know that the people there understand it better than Congress does here. But he could have changed it by repainting that picture, and then he could have followed that up with a solution, which would have been his budget. Instead, his budget was another stimulus plan. And it has been voted on by Congress. It wasn't voted for by Congress. It was voted on by Congress, and it was voted 97-0. It was defeated. Now, I think that the Deficit Commission report would have done much better. Now, Congress has also had the chance to change direction, and in some cases we have. We have kind of eliminated earmarks. There's still some of them that are slipped in there, but we've kind of eliminated them. And we have a couple of new problems. Now we add demonstration projects. Oh, we've always added demonstration projects, but now we do it as a substitute for earmarks. And that's where we allow maybe 5 states to have an opportunity to do a particular program to see if it works. And so we fund it in a minimal amount. That still is millions. The difficulty is that at the end of the period of time for that demonstration project, they all work. They're all spectacular. They all would save America if we just put it in every single state and funded it from the federal government. Can't happen. We're out of money. There are lots of good ideas out there, lots of good ideas that would help. And when those ideas are proved, the idea with the demonstration is that it would demonstrate well enough how good it is that somewhere at the local level that project would be picked up and done or forgotten. But no, we do make them a national program, and we do fund them forever in chunks of time. Another thing that we're doing is that we propose a project, and because we like the word pay for, because we should pay for whatever we're doing, we put up a project, we put a 2-year limit on the project. And then we pick a pay for by showing some program that if it were eliminated for 10 years, might bring in that amount of revenue. You can't pay for a 2-year program with 10 years worth of revenue, because somebody's going to spend the rest of that anyway and may never be collected, and the Congress can change their mind all the time. So we've got to quit using gimmicks, and we have to quit adding new programs. What part of maxed out credit cards don't we understand? We have to quit buying votes with dollars that we don't have. Now, we do have to address mandatory spending. Social Security and Medicare have been a problem for a long time. I remember when I first came to Congress, President Clinton was the president, and he called for a special conference on Social Security. And we had one day where we got to be initiated into what all the problems were. Fantastic speakers. We had a second day where members of the House and Congress met in smaller committees to work on pieces of the Social Security problem. And we came up with a plan. And President Clinton looked at the plan and met with us as a group and said, you know, if all of you are willing to put your fingerprint on this, we'll do it. Now, we can only do it if everybody puts their fingerprint on it so that both parties are responsible for it, and everybody in the room agreed to do that. Unfortunately, we were distracted a little bit by something called Monica Lewinsky, and that bill never came up anywhere. What we're in a situation right now is packaging bills to fail. Each side, I think, has a tendency to put up a bill that has something really good in it, packaged with something that they really like, but the other side doesn't like. So it's going to get defeated on the basis of what each side doesn't like. And the good part's left out. That's not going to get anything done for us. We have tried the stimulus bill. We got negligible effects on jobs. It did escalate the basis for budgets, and it was the use of one-time money. And that's created some problems for us. We hear that 30,000 teachers and firefighters are going to be laid off. That comes from safety money and education money that went to the states, and it was one-time money. Now, you can't use one-time money for a continuing contract. If a state did, yes, they are having to lay off people because the stimulus isn't being repeated each and every year. So are there solutions? Yes, there are solutions. And I'm optimistic about the solutions. I do recognize that everything has to be on the table. And we should all reread the Deficit Commission report. We have to ask constituents to suggest their own programs to reduce. In the spring, we'll be inundated by a whole lot of people that will be ready to have us support the program that really makes a difference in their life and the life of the community. I always ask them how we're going to pay for it, and they always suggest somebody else's program to cancel. There are never any suggestions of how to consolidate within their own program and do it. So they've got to do it, and each of us in Congress need to evaluate our own programs. Not all of them can be sacred cows. I want to congratulate Senator Rubio and Senator Coons for a jobs creation bill that they've put together. They've taken the diverse bills from both sides of the aisle and several others and looked to see if there was any common thread. And all they did was pick out the common thread from each of those and put them into a bill. Now, if both sides and the other and others in Congress like it, why wouldn't that pass and pass quickly? I want to congratulate our lone Congressman Lummis from Wyoming. She's on the Appropriations Committee. It's, I think, the first time we've ever had anybody on the Appropriations Committee. And she really gets into the detail of the budget. In fact, she's gotten into details of the budget down to very small amounts, so much that she's been told that she's not going to be invited on any trips with any of the rest of them. That's probably what we need right now, and I congratulate her on her detail. Another thing we've got to do is make sure that bills go to committee. I've been a committee chairman. I've been a ranking member. I know that when a bill goes to committee, that's where you really can get into the details of the bill, and you can do nuances. If a bill comes to the floor, and it came from the president to the leader and then to us, the amendments that we put in are not very workable as far as reaching agreement from both sides. They're kind of an up or down vote, and they're very political, and that kind of stymies what we're trying to do. We've got to quit doing comprehensive bills. We can do them in stages. We can do parts of them. They can be very major parts, but it can be done in parts. I remember reading a book about the Compromise of 1850. Henry Clay put himself in the hospital trying to pass this huge compromise. And when he did, some friends of his took up the bill, broke it up into parts, 4 parts, and got all the parts passed. Now, there were only 4 people in all of the Senate at that time that voted for all of the parts, but all the parts passed. Should be a lesson there for us. I do follow an 80% rule, which I found we can agree on 80% of the issues, and if we stick to that 80%, we can pick any one issue and we can solve 80% of that problem. We could solve 100%. We could get everybody together to think of an alternative way to do that one sticky part that we've had polarized for years. Another thing we need to do is eliminate some duplication around here. Senator Coburn and I took a look at the primary department that comes under the jurisdiction of my Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. We found $9 billion in duplication. Now, because it's duplication, you can't eliminate all $9 billion because there are some that would still stay that are doing the same thing as what the other group is saying. But it stimulated Senator Coburn enough that he took a look at all of the programs. And in all the programs, he found $900 billion worth of duplication. Now, duplication isn't like fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud, waste, and abuse, we don't know how much of it there is out there, and we discover it a piece at a time, and we speculate on how much it is. But duplication is specific because it's already in the budget. You can look at what they're being paid right now, and if you eliminate that, it's a specific amount. So when he talks about $900 billion worth of duplication, it's $900 billion worth of duplication. Ought to be able to get at least rid of $450 billion of that. Half of it must be duplication. Implies that twice as much as what you could effectively need. Now, why did we find $9 billion in one really big agency and $900 billion by looking at all of them? When you go outside of the jurisdiction, you find out that there is, this one always kind of interests me, financial literacy programs in virtually every department and agency of this federal government. If we really got financial literacy, would we be in the position that we're in now? I don't think so. So that's a whole lot of duplication. It's duplicating each and every agency. But if you only have jurisdiction over one agency, that's the only place you can eliminate it. When I got here, there were 119 preschool programs. And took a look at them. There were quite a few of them that were failing according to their own evaluation. Not my evaluation, their own evaluation. They said what they were going to do, then they checked to see if they did it. They didn't. So we were able to get that down to 69 programs. There are 69 preschool programs at the present time. Now, here's the interesting part of that. Only 8 of those are under the Department of Education. 61 of them are in the other departments. Seems like we could have some consolidation and maybe some elimination of duplication there. Also, we have the states and the local governments coming to us and saying, we're out of money, we need money. And we don't have any money. We can't afford to help them that way. But I put in a bill that would help them to collect the sales tax that's already due from them. And that's the Marketplace Fairness Bill. That would take care of their infrastructure and their jobs. So I hope everyone will take a look at that. And finally, another solution would be these Buy Back America bonds that I spoke about just a little while ago. If everybody bought some bonds that could reduce the amount of debt held by foreign countries, that would help us, and then that would reduce the amount of spending by an equal amount. There are solutions out there. It's time that we got busy on them. I thank the Super Committee for their work and ask everybody to pay attention to whatever they come up with. I yield the floor.
Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, first I ask unanimous consent that Christopher White, a National Security Fellow in Senator Warner's office, be given floor privileges during consideration of the pending bill.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and that the following amendments be called up en bloc.
Without objection.
They are Senator Sherrod Brown, 1259, 1260, 1261, 1262, 1263, Senator Leahy, 1080, Senator Wyden, 1296, Senator Pryor, 1151 and 1152, and Senator Bill Nelson, 1209, 1210, 1236, and 1255.
Without objection.
Now, do you want to get yours done and then we'll do this?
Mr. President.
The senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to temporarily set aside the pending amendment and call up the following amendments en bloc. Senator McCain, Amendment 1281 regarding the transfer of arms to Georgia. Senator Blunt's 2 amendments, 1133 and 1134. Senator Murkowski's 2 amendments, Amendment 1286 and 1287. And Senator Rubio's 2 amendments, 1290 and 1291. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Without objection.
President,
Senator from Michigan.
I would then ask for the regular order after all those actions are taken.
The amendments are now pending.
Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent to call up en bloc 5 amendments which have been cleared by myself and the ranking member as follows. Amendment number 1071 on behalf of Senator McCain to require the Secretary of Defense to report on all information with respect to the Evolved Expendable Launch Vehicle program that would be required if the program were designated as a major defense acquisition program not in the sustainment phase. Amendment number 1086 on behalf of Senators Roberts and Moran to authorize and request the President to award the Medal of Honor posthumously to Captain Emil Capone of the United States Army for acts of valor during the Korean War. Amendment number 1106 on behalf of Senator McCain to require a report on the status of implementation of accepted recommendations in the final report of the 2010 Army Acquisition Review Panel. Amendment number 1140 on behalf of Senator Casey to require a report by the Comptroller General on the Department of Defense Military Spouse Employment Program. And Amendment number 1219 on behalf of myself to provide authority to order military reserves to active duty to provide assistance in response to a disaster or emergency.
Mr. President, the amendments have been cleared on our side.
Without objection.
And so I now ask consent.
The amendments are listed.
I ask consent then that the Senate consider the amendments en bloc. The amendments agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid on the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I thank the presiding officer.
There appears to be no objection. Without objection, the Senate will stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
Well, the U.S. Senate today has been considering amendments to the 2012 Defense Programs Bill. That legislation sets military